All right, good morning, friends. It's Thursday, and it looks like it's going to be another great day, doesn't it? We're going to have we got all kinds of things going on today, don't we? I mean, life's going to come at us, and it's going to be fun. And here's what I forget when I start teaching through the scriptures. I forget that it's like almost as soon as I start teaching about something, I have to live out what I'm teaching, right? So we're in trials now, and it just seems like, okay, here's one, and here's one. All of a sudden, it's like I feel like I just got hit on the superhighway, and trials like come at you. Not big ones, right? I mean, some of you are going through some really big stuff. I don't have a lot of big trials that come in my life. It's funny too as you mature, right? Big trials, you go, okay, all right, it's a big one, and you tend to settle in and get your bearings and get your mindset right, and then you just plow through those. It's those little ones that kind of just keep nipping at your heels that you just kind of at some point just want to kind of like slap them, right? And it's interesting how life comes at us. So just kind of going through some of those. I was talking with Tammy just about this. I wouldn't call it a trial, but it's just an irritating thing that I'm dealing with right now. And it's just like, okay, well, it's just life. So here we go. Thank you, Jesus, for wisdom from James. And so that's where we are. Listen, if you've been tracking with us, we're in the book of James, and we're slowly working our way through the very first section of this thing. And James, being the half brother of our Lord, having just lived and heard all of his teachings, speaks a lot like Jesus. And I love the way James talks. So James is a mature follower near the end of his life, although he's still in his 50s. He'll die somewhere around 60 years old, which is my age. But anyway, so that's where he is, and he's just lived life. He pastored. He's strong pastor, pillar of the community is what Paul calls him. And so he's in the book of James. I mean, he's in the city of Jerusalem, and and so he's pastoring the church. The poverty, persecution, famine has caused a lot of his congregation, his gathering, to scatter, just looking for either running for persecution or looking for work or trying to find food. And so that's kind of where they are. So he writes the letter, and he opens up and begins by saying, greetings. James, a bondservant of Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes who are dispersed abroad, who are just kind of scattered, greetings to you. And then he jumps into trials. And so that's where we are. And we're about to finish that little section. But I want to kind of continue the theme. We've been adding to it the steps to overcome trials. So we already know trials come at us, and they come at us regularly. And sometimes they're seasonally, but there's a reality. Either we are going into a trial, we are in the middle of a trial, or we've just finished a trial, which means we're about to go into another trial. Sometimes trials, they're many, right? They're varied, polka dotted. So there's big ones, small ones. You may be dealing with 10 trials at one time, just issues of life. And what James is determined that we don't get sidetracked by those things. Isn't that what trips us up? We get focused and we start living a lesser life, and we start complaining about this irritation here and why we don't have this and all of those. And so James is getting ready to move into a section where he gives us a pretty stiff contrast. And that's where we're going to be today. So let me just get a running start. He says, consider all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various, that is, polka-dotted sized trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let that endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. That whole statement is to tell us that trials are going to come. Let's see them in right perspective, because they're going to bring maturity in our life. And that's the goal of trials, to bring us to maturity, to cause us to learn how to live above the trials, to live and not just endure, but thrive through trials. And so all of it's perspective, and this is what we've seen. So the steps that we've looked at so far is consider joy, right? Consider. He gives these directives or imperatives. He's 60 of them throughout the scriptures, throughout his letter alone. And anyway, so he's rattling them off. So the first thing we need to do is when a trial comes is we consider joy. We get to choose our feels, is how I've kind of phrased it. Choose your feels. right? So I can have an emotion of real anger and hate and whatever that it's my choice. So he says, choose joy. Well, why would I choose joy in the midst of this mess that I don't want and didn't even ask for? Because God is able and will use that to do some really good work in your life. So that's that eternal perspective. The world can't relate to that, but you and me can. And so this is what he says: consider. Then he says, know. That is, hey, know that it's pointing you to maturity. You consider it a joyful thing because God is at work. All things work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. God's going to take this little irritant, this little trial, this little whatever, and he's going to produce some really great stuff out of it. So just let him have it, let him do it. And that's why the third step, so the first step is consider, second is know, the third is let maturity come. So I kind of rephrase that one, don't live stupid, right? Don't live in right now. Don't live in the stupid right now. Live knowing that, hey, good things are coming down the road. Now he says, once you've got those three bearings, then you should ask for wisdom. That's verse 5. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously. God doesn't go, I'm not giving to you. I gave you wisdom last time and you just squandered it. I'm not giving you anymore. He's not like that. He gives freely to all who ask. It says, without reproach. He's not keeping score up there going, no, I'm not giving you any more wisdom. I gave you 3 bouts of wisdom last week and you wasted it. I'm done with you. Come back and see me tomorrow. Not how he operates. So we ask. We ask for wisdom. But when we ask for wisdom, rest assured, God is going to give it to us. Primarily the way he gives it to us is through Scripture. I think there's really about 5 ways. Maybe we'll talk about that somewhere down the road. That God, 5 instruments, 5 tools God uses to bring his will toward our life. But really for 2 or 3 of them, one of them is going to be the Scriptures, and the other is going to be circumstances, and then sometimes it's people. So I'm looking at 3 of them right now. So that's how he's going to work in these trials. And so I need to see him that way. I'm going to ask God for wisdom, and I'm going to look. I'm going to look in the Scriptures for wisdom. I'm going to listen to the voices that kind of have begun to creep into my life because God is probably sending someone to you to help you work through that trial without them even knowing that they're doing that. We all know that to be true. And then sometimes circumstances line up. Doors, there's a closed door, there's an open door. And so you realize, okay, well that's not wisdom. That's not going to get me out of here. That door just slammed in my face. Or hey, there's an open door. Maybe that's wisdom. I'm going to step that way. That's how we endure these trials. That's how we thrive in the midst of it. But I can't doubt. I have to be all in at this point. I won't reach maturity if I fight my trials. So don't doubt. Don't go, I don't like that answer, God. I'm going to look for something else. When you hear the wisdom of God, you start stepping. Don't delay, just step. That's the whole faith thing. And so we tend to fight trials, or sometimes trials, they don't end as fast as we want, and our patience kind of wears thin, and we just start looking in for the exit door. Don't do that either. He says, let it have its perfect result. Let it run its course. Don't fight this trial. Now, then, because he says, listen, if you do that, you're going to be unstable. You're going to be tossed to and fro, and these trials, you're going to look like a squirrel trying to cross the road, and you're going to get nowhere. You're never going to get to the destination. You start that way and you jump back. You ever watch the squirrel cross the road? It's crazy to see. They don't know which way they're going. That's the picture I get when we're in the middle of a trial and God gives us wisdom, like, hey, this way. And then we're going, I'm not sure which way to go. No, you're just scared. You're never gonna get to where you want to go that way. And so this is what he says. Now, the 6th step, if you've been keeping up with me, it's consider, know, let, ask, and don't doubt. Those are the first 5 steps. The 6th one is humility is essential. Now listen to how he does this, because this is on the surface, this looks like it's maybe just he shifted gears and talking about something else, but that's not true. He's consistently talking about what he's been talking about, because verse 12 lets me know he's still in the context of trials. But let's look at what he says in verse 9, 10, and 11. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. So he's talking about the poor here, humble circumstances. That's a nice phrase and way to say you're just poor. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. And the rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flowering grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flowers fall off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man, in the midst of his pursuits, will fade away. Wow, it sounds kind of depressing on the surface. And man, listen, James loves to talk about the rich and the poor. This is the very first encounter, but you're going to see this pop up about 4 more times. He's going to hit home this deal. He's not fond of the wealthy who don't give honor to God and don't use it, much like Paul did when he told Timothy, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to put their hope in riches, which is fleeting, but to be rich and generous and willing to share. So he says, because that gives us life indeed. That's how Paul tells Timothy to do it. James says it pretty much like this. So let's kind of look at what he's talking about, because what I see is humility is essential. In this trial, humility is essential. Now, I will leave it to you to decide whether you're poor or you're rich in the economy of what he's talking about here. But the poor and the rich will have to see things differently. The contrast is often, and each one brings its own trials, right? Tammy and I have been poor, and from our perspective, and we've been wealthy from all perspective as well. And each one brings a different deal. When we were younger, we had very little money, and when we were starting out in ministry, we had very little. In fact, most of my life, we've had not a lot of money in ministry, and so you have a whole different set of trials. And so what he's showing us, and we're going to look at too really quickly, for the poor, he's saying, listen, those trials tend to be because you don't see yourself as having enough, right? A trial would be your kids need new clothes and you don't have the money to buy the back to school clothes, or your car broke down and you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to get to work now, right? Those are trials that are real and they're difficult. And Paul is giving us wisdom of attitude. James is giving us wisdom of attitude right here when he says this. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. Now, he's speaking much like Jesus in the sense of high position is that spiritual standing that is ours. And so he's saying, hey, listen, you focus on your spiritual. When this trial comes, and it's like it's a lack. This trial is a trial of lack. I lack enough resources. I lack enough education. I lack enough whatever. He says, listen, don't settle and cop out and go, oh, it's just the poor. If I just wasn't poor, he says, you focus on your spiritual position. That's your wisdom of how to get through this trial. Don't focus on the lack. God will meet that, right? Doesn't he say so? I mean, isn't that what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount? Why are you worrying? Look at the lilies of the field. Look at the birds of the air. They have everything they need. And Jesus is saying, and God the Father will meet every need you have. So don't do that. And so here's the thing. Where's our focus? My spiritual position. That attitude alone is going to carry you out of that poverty. Paul was the very one that. Paul said, look, I know what it is to live with a lot. I know what it is to live with little. And when Paul says little, he means little, like lots of famine and lots of not eating, lots of spending a day and a night in the deep, a lot of beatings, a lot of physical ailments. This was true of Paul. And in all those things, he says, but I've learned of the secret to contentment. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So what's he saying there? I'm going to look to my provision. I'm going to look to the fact that I'm a child of the King. I'm going to look to the fact that I've been blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. That this is just a little thing, right? So I can't lay a feast out for my family like maybe the world can. But none of us are going hungry, right? And I may not, my car may not get me where I can go, but I've got a wealth of brothers and sisters in the faith that will help me get to where I need to go, or God has given me the ability to walk, and so I can walk to work. Right? This is that perspective. Now I know it's crazy, and it doesn't say the world doesn't think like that, but then we're not of the world, and so this is what he says. The aspect of our trials is going to be in contentment. With this I will be content. Whatever the Lord gives to me, that I will be content. For he will always meet my needs. That wisdom and that application of the end game of knowing that, hey, this life's fleeting, man. I've got wealth being stored up in heaven. I mean, it's all good. This is how the church down through the ages has always survived their trials. This is how they've thrived in the midst of it. This is what's irritated the world so much. First century writers who wrote about the church made assessments, and they would say these Christians are an odd group. For when one of them doesn't have enough to eat, the others will fast 1 or 2 days a week to store up food to give to the one who doesn't have. And you see that the others were in poverty too, or they wouldn't be fasting in order to give to the other. And he's saying this is a crazy world that those people live in. They just love each other and they take care of each other. So if your trial right now is of lack, it's like I don't have enough. You remember who you are, and just be humble and grateful for what God has blessed you with, and be content with that. Because it won't always be this way. Now, then he goes to the rich, and he begins to kind of, it's harsh, right? He says, and the rich glory in your humiliation. Okay, so your trial is your first world problems. Wah, wah, wah. Your second car's not working right. Your clothes, they're not as up to date as everybody else's, or whatever's going on, whatever that trial is. I have nothing to wear. When you got a closet full of stuff, he's going, hey, you know what? You should feel the humiliation of knowing that you have excess. Now that's not, I don't mean to make it sound like James is like slamming them, but he is reminding them that their focus is to be on the fact that wealth is fleeting. This is his deal. That's the theme throughout the scriptures. Jesus says, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Moth, rot, rust. It's going to destroy it all. You treasure up treasure in heaven." So what's he saying? Hey, stuff's fleeting, man. What did Solomon, the writer of the Proverbs, wealthiest man ever to live? It's all fleeting. When life is over, it all goes back in the box, man. I store up all this wealth. When I die, my kids who didn't even earn it, they get it. And here's what I realized. The poor man that I watched live the same season of life that I did, and I had great means and he didn't have both, we both end up naked in a grave. That's what happens. I was born naked, and I'm going to end that same way. And so it's a perspective. So what's the perspective of the rich when the trial is not lack, but but it's of loss? Oh man, I lost this, or I don't have that, or I don't have this. What's he saying? Hey, keep perspective. Everything's fleeting, man. This is what he says. The flowers, grass will pass away. The sun rises, scorches wind, and withers the grass, and the flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too, the rich man in the midst of his pursuits will fade away. Just understand, hey, all the stuff you're chasing, it's going to go away anyway. So what does it matter if he went away today? If it's not today, it'll be tomorrow. And if it's not tomorrow, it's going to be at some point in your life. It's going to fall away. So understand and have that attitude. Hold loosely to the things that are fleeting. That's great advice. I'm reminded of the story of John Wesley when he was out preaching in the fields, and he was consumed with preaching the gospel. Someone came running to him and said, hey, John, your house is on fire. And his response was, it's crazy, good. That's one less thing I have to worry about. That's how you thrive in the midst of trials. John Wesley just lost his house, and he's going, hey, it's just a thing, man. It's fleeting. That's not the essential. And so that's the attitude, that's the wisdom thought that the wealthy should have. So I love the brutality of James. He's like, hey, you're going to get through trials. Here it is. And he doesn't hold back punches. He doesn't try to sugarcoat things. He just goes, this is it. And then he says this, and this is kind of wraps up this whole thing. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trials. Who you just plow through them. For once he has been approved, once you've passed the test, and God stamps it going approved. Man, you did well in this trial. You persevered to the end. You grew. You got maturity. He says you will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. He goes, hey, that's your reward. This life is going to give you all kind of ups and downs, but at the end of it, because you put your faith in Christ, and that faith has only grown stronger day by day, even through these trials, when you get to heaven, there's a crown of life for you. And that's the message that we're going to bring to you today. And I probably talked longer. Actually, I did talk a lot longer. I just saw the clock. But, man, Lord bless you guys. Hope you have a great day. And I'll see you tomorrow.